listeners. My name is Tracy Kriegel, and I'm a counselor here at Student Wellbeing.
And my name's Amber Johnston. I'm also a counselor here at Student Wellbeing, and it's time for your morning cup of joe. So, Tracy, what do you know about imposter syndrome?
Well, Amber, it's kind of like when somebody just gets an award for something that they don't feel like they deserve, kind of something like that, right?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's efforts or skills. That's according to the dictionary.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Yes. In layman's terms, basically, it means it's that feeling we get when somebody praises us, or we get an award, or we get recognition, and we feel like we don't deserve it. That we feel like we're going to get found out, that we're going to get in trouble, that somebody's going to realize that we're a fraud. It's that feeling that we're just a fraud.
Seen lots of movies about that.
Yes, there are, and it's extremely common. So 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at some point in their life. And 25 to 30% of high achievers at any given time are experiencing feelings of imposter syndrome. So it's super, super common. And the more educated and the higher achieving you are, the greater that feeling is.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the more you know, the more that you don't know.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a really great example for a movie for this.
I knew you would, Amber. So,
have you ever seen the movie Ratatouille?
Like the rat? Ratatouille?
Yes, the movie with the rat.
I love Ratatouille.
Yes, it's one of my favorites. Like, I watch it all the time. So for those of you who have not seen the movie, Ratatouille is about a rat. It's a cartoon. It's Disney, and it's about a rat that loves food and cooking. And all the other mice are fine with eating garbage, but then you have this rat. His name is Remy, and he is got this incredible sense of smell, an incredible sense of taste, and he is just not happy with garbage.
Nope, not happening. Didn't he just float across the back,
on his smell?
Smelling, and he just floated through the back alleyway, smelling, dancing across the alleyway.
Smelling all the good smells. That's some incredible smell. It's smell that gives you flight.
Yes. Savoring the smell.
It reminds me of, do you remember Rescue Rangers?
Yeah.
And Monterey Jack used to, the mouse Monterey Jack on Rescue Rangers, he used to, whenever he smelled cheese, he would float on the cheese smell.
Tom and Jerry, they did that too.
Did they?
They did, yes.
That's another one of our cartoon tropes.
Yeah.
Anyway. So Remy, going back to Remy. Remy, he is not happy with eating garbage. He thinks it's disgusting.
Don't blame him. Who would like garbage?
I wouldn't eat garbage either. And he thinks it's disgusting, and they live in the attic of this old lady's house in Paris.
Oh, Remy.
Yeah. And so he has been reading these books by a famous chef named Auguste Gusteau. And he's this famous deceased French chef. And all of a sudden, one day, they get discovered, and they have to leave this attic because she's trying to kill them because, well, they're rats. And they get kicked, they have to leave, and they're out on the streets of Paris, and he gets separated from all the rest of the rats, and he ends up finding Gusteau's restaurant in Paris. And Gusteau's restaurant, it's struggling a little bit. It's down to 3 stars from 5. Ooh. And he goes in there, and there is the soup cooking on the stove, and he ends up editing the soup. Editing. I've been editing too many podcasts here. He starts adding some spices to the soup, and to make the soup taste better. And because he's having this whole internal conversation with the ghost of Gustav, who's like conveniently like rat size, and yeah. So and the ghost of Gustav is telling him, or Gusteau is telling him,
Gusto.
Gusteau is telling him all like, you can do it, anybody can cook, you've got the skill, you know how to make that soup better, and so he does. He makes the soup better. Well, the soup ends up impressing a critic, and then they're trying to figure out who made the soup, because you can't be like, oh, the rat made the soup. Like, you've got to, like, who made the soup? And they blame the soup and its success on this garbage boy, and his name is Linguini. Like,
Linguini.
yes, Alfredo Linguini.
That's great.
No comment on that. His name is Alfredo Linguini. So he ends up, Linguini takes for credit for the soup. Linguini knows he didn't make it, and he has no idea how to cook, right? And so he ends up finding Remy, and he realizes that Remy made the soup, and Remy can't talk, but they understand each other. And so they end up kind of inventing this whole like scenario where Remy operates Linguini like a marionette. Like, he sits inside of his little chef's hat and he pulls on his hair to operate him like a marionette so that he can cook. But it looks like Linguini's the one who's cooking.
So, Amber, I'm kind of trying to follow you, but where does imposter syndrome come into this whole Linguini, Gusto, and Remy thing? So, because he's a rat with no formal cook training, working at a world famous French restaurant, and he sounds pretty confident to me, right? So yeah, you could expound on this, right?
Yeah. Well, it seems like he's got his stuff together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But really, he doesn't. Because what we see is a lot of Remy's doubt come in the form of these conversations with the miniaturized ghost of Gusteau. Again, he's like rat-sized, floaty little ghost. And he has these conversations with Gusteau, and Gusteau is kind of like the positive self-talk, and then Remy like expresses his doubt, and so he'll say something like, Gusteau will say like, anybody can cook, and then Remy will tell him, but not everybody should. Mm-hmm. And so it's like Remy's got these self-doubts, and then Gusteau is boosting him up. And so that's kind of where I'm relating that to that negative self-talk that we get with imposter syndrome. Okay. And it all accumulates with Remy saying that he's tired of pretending that he's something he isn't. He pretends he's a rat for his father, a human for Linguini, and that his only reason that Gusteau is there and in boosting him up and helping him is because is in telling him the things that he knows. He already knows. And he's like, why do I need you doing this? You're telling me stuff I already know. And then he says,
he doesn't.
Right. He says he doesn't. And Remy had it in him the whole time. He just lacked the confidence. Kind of like this Dumbo feather moment.
So let's relate that back to imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome happens when we lack confidence about our skills and effort, right? Mm-hmm. So I see it in a lot of people who are graduating.
Yes.
Yeah, so they feel like they haven't learned anything, or they feel like they don't know if they'll be able to get the job once they graduate.
Right.
So the symptoms of imposter syndrome are things like anxiety, feeling like you're out of your depth.
Yes.
Yeah, so depression, feeling worthless or inadequate. So I see that a lot with students who say, I just don't feel like I'm worth anything, I'm just not adequate enough to get this job.
I hear a lot of I don't deserve to be here, especially from freshmen. Mm-hmm. They feel like them getting in was a mistake. Mm-hmm. I hear that from every fall, like so many freshmen.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. And then the inability to accept praise. So praise feels wrong and sometimes can feel like mocking.
Like, you're making fun of me.
Yeah, it feels unearned. Maybe praise can make us feel uncomfortable. So when other people are praising us, like it's just, I don't deserve that.
Yeah.
So it's just kind
You're
of like
lying to me. Why are you saying this stuff?
Accolades aren't right. So
Right.
And then there's perfectionism. So imposter syndrome can make us put ourselves under this like impossible standards, and then we feel disappointment when we can't meet those standards.
Right.
Yeah. So that and then there's also self doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a huge part of feeling like you just aren't good enough and you don't have the skills.
Yes.
Yes, it's just that constant like nagging feeling that I'm not good enough for this.
Right. I'm out of my depth. Yeah.
And then there's that sabotaging success.
Right. That's when we get more into the extreme forms of imposter syndrome. Absolutely.
So people with imposter syndrome can do this in a variety of ways. So they can elect to not try. They can intentionally not finish something. Like, I'm just not going to do it. Nope, not happening. And then they're afraid that they aren't good enough. So it's easier to sabotage yourself on purpose than to have verification that you aren't good enough for anything. So just don't try. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to fail, so why not try?
Right. Because if I don't try, then I always have this idea in the back of my head that there's a possibility that I could have done it. But if I try and fail, for some people, like especially people who are like suffering from imposter syndrome, that takes that question out of the thing. But does it really? Like when we don't try and we fail because we predicted that we don't try, we have also taken out the possibility for success. Like we don't know what our capabilities are, and just because we failed doesn't mean we're incapable. It just means that the circumstances and that the situation at that time was not conductive to us being able to achieve what we wanted to at that moment. Doesn't mean that we won't ever.
Right. Yeah. Don't you think that substances, when people are under the influence of substances, can really affect someone's thought processes?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, especially like if they're like certain drugs and certain things like that can absolutely affect our levels of imposter syndrome and how we think about things.
Right. Yeah. Because someone who's sabotaging themselves for success, if they're constantly drinking and they're getting intoxicated on a daily basis, there's just that I'm not going to succeed. I'm just not going to make it through this. And there's just that overwhelming dread of, am I going to make it in this world?
Right.
That fear of failure.
Well, and when we use intoxicants like beyond recreational use, you start getting into this. It starts affecting your self-esteem, and so the more you use it, the less you feel worthy, and it's this vicious cycle. It's that cycle of addiction, and it's rough stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are some causes of imposter syndrome? First of all, fear of failure. That's the number one cause right there. No one in the history of imposter syndrome had it about something that didn't matter to them. It's things that are important to you. And this can be either just our personality, or we can be raised to feel like we are going to fail or that we're afraid of failing. But it's going to be something that's important to us that we're afraid we're going to mess up. So common things that I see people, new students, like freshmen, they get here and then they see all of these like super, super smart people that are here. And then they feel like I'm not as smart as them. I'm not as capable as them and so they start feeling like I don't deserve to be here. And then I see it a lot with new parents. They have a new child and then they feel like, well, I can't get my baby to stop crying. I'm a terrible mother. Like I'm just faking it. Like, those kind of things. Neither of those things are true. When you come in here, you've got to realize we all have our own strengths and our own weaknesses, and they're different. And so you bring something to the table that no one else, a unique combination of skills that no one else brings. And that's your contribution.
Right. Absolutely.
And our next one is the negative self-talk and automatic thoughts. So we've talked about those a whole lot. We've talked about ABC model and all that kind of stuff. This goes along with that narrative, theme song, CBT stuff that we've talked about before. We form ideas of how the world works, and it forms these automatic thoughts. And if the thoughts tell me I'm a screw up, then guess what I'll be thinking about myself? I'm going to be thinking I'm a screw up, and I'm going to think that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve praise. I don't deserve this award. I don't deserve whatever. Next is external pressure. So sometimes the pressure to live up to these impossible standards can come from somebody outside of us. And it could be a teacher or a family member, or somebody making you feel pressure to quote, measure up, to be good enough, like be better, do better, that kind of thing. And last is lack of confidence. And this is really the heart of it, of imposter syndrome. Just like Remy lacked the confidence in his cooking abilities, many people find it hard to believe in themselves, no matter how much education they have, no matter how much experience they have. They still hit a situation that maybe they've never had before, or they hit a situation that maybe they've not come across a whole lot, and they feel that momentarily stop and I don't know what to do moment, that lack of confidence.
So when I've heard you talking, Amber, I was thinking there's probably several areas that imposter syndrome can affect, but I was thinking, it really probably affects personal relationships.
Yes.
It really affects people's careers.
Mm-hmm.
It probably affects our self-esteem.
Uh-huh.
And then I would really guess that it affects, probably one of the main area it affects is our mental health.
Right.
Because, when you think about our mental well-being, everything you're talking about, fear of failure, automatic thoughts, or negative self-talk, external pressure, and lack of confidence, holy cow, how could that not affect our mental well-being?
It's going to.
Yeah, it's going to.
It goes back to that idea of like it's going to cause symptoms of anxiety and depression, and it's going to cause all those kind of things. Well, and think about how it would affect your relationships. You've got imposter syndrome, and so you start feeling like you're getting praise that you don't deserve, and so that causes that feeling of uncomfortableness. What's going to happen? Well, if I'm carrying that around, is that going to start affect how I'm interacting with my loved ones? Right. Absolutely. I might have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. So my loved one comes to talk to me about blah, 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 blah. And now all of a sudden I've snapped at them and I didn't mean to.
Right. Then,
because I'm on edge.
Right. And then your relationship with your parents.
Yes.
If you've got this fear of failure, is that being driven from you're afraid you're not going to get the grades you need, you're going to disappoint your parents, or maybe there's an expectation, that you have to get this certain grade level, or a perceived expectation that you got to perform at a certain level, and so you're afraid then if you get a B, because in high school maybe always it was A was the expectation and you get a B, then maybe that expectation, if you go home and say, oh my gosh, I got a B or a C, but yet your GPA is still an acceptable GPA, but in your mind, then you've got this automatic thought processes that, I'm not good enough and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And then your relationship doesn't get to the stage that you want to, and your thoughts create, it's just like this vicious cycle, and then it just creates this breakdown in relationships, your self-esteem, and then your mental well-being suffers all along,
Well, and you get in this cycle where people start feeling like they have to be good enough to deserve love and affection. So, and that's a big one that, we unpack as therapists like all the time, because they feel like I have to meet certain standards and I have to be a certain way in order to earn love. And the thing of it is, it's not true. Absolutely 100% not true. You are deserving of love and affection just for being a human being and just for being alive. You don't have to earn that. But because imposter syndrome and lack of confidence and low self-esteem can make us feel it that way, we feel like our acceptance and our value as a human being can depend on whether we got that A or not.
Right.
So let's go back to what we can do. So we've talked about all the hazards. let's kind of give us some solutions here, because otherwise it's just a really depressing episode.
Right. Well, that what we can do, how we get help. That's the most important part.
Right.
Right. Call it out. Tell us what it is, because we all know what it is.
Well, typically through counseling and stuff, or for those of you who've done counseling before, we can work with the ABC model. We talked a little bit about the ABC model here on the podcast before, and that's the activating event, behavior, consequences. It's a CBT model that helps us break down our automatic thoughts and reform them into something more positive. So in this case, if I'm having the thought of I'm a screw up, I'm never going to get any better, like I don't deserve this, we would stop and replace that thought with something more positive, which that would then eventually over time change our belief, which then would change our emotional reaction and how we react to the situation. So that's also, we also call that, or that process, cognitive reframing. So we can also do it that way. We can also use mindfulness. So we're having negative thoughts and they're happening and we want to stop them. We can use that thought stopping tactic of using mindfulness techniques. And Tracy, that's your forte right there.
Right. Yeah. This next semester, we're going to be doing a positive mindfulness program.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's in about week 8. One of the homework assignments is actually going to be, we'll be doing a gratitude meditation within the actual class. And the homework assignment is actually going to be giving, and I'll just kind of one of the things, if you want to try it for yourself, is actually at the end of the day at the end of the day when you go home, and every day, ask yourself this question: what are 3 things you're grateful for?
Mm-hmm.
There was a large research study that was done that if people can ask themselves, or at the end of the day, ask yourself, what are 3 things you're thankful for? There was research study that was done that showed that people who practice gratitude, ask themselves what they're grateful for at the end of each day, there's a direct correlation between your mental and your physical health, of improved physical well-being and mental well-being when you practice gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And so try that if you want to, but mindfulness, mindful meditation is a wonderful practice to help with dealing with what we're talking about, imposter syndrome, helping yourself feel more improved when it comes to fear of failure, negative self-talk, external pressure, and lack of confidence. So mindfulness is an absolutely wonderful place to deal with all these things that we've been talking about in the podcast today. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing we can do is distraction. We start having, because we've got these negative thoughts and they're just kind of going down. Like I said, I've talked to them about them as theme songs before. It's like you get that song starts playing, and I had it happen to me yesterday. I had somebody said something that made me think of a couple lyrics of a song, and before you know it, I was singing Jump Around.
That's awesome.
It was just, I don't know what cued the lyrics in, but I had Jump Around stuck in my head for like half the afternoon. So but that's the way these automatic thoughts work. You get a couple, like something pops in your head and it makes that thought stream start. And then you just go, and it's almost verbatim each time. I'm never going to get this. I'm not good enough, blah, 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 blah. And that's your, think about that little theme song playing lyrics, and you're going down the lyrics of a song until something distracts you and you get the song out of your head. So just like you have to play a different song to get a theme song, to get that earworm out of your head, I had to listen to a different song to get Jump Around stuck out of my head.
Right.
You have to do something to distract yourself and get that song out. And so you can do that. And that's a quick little way that we can kind of just stop it, the descent into that dark place.
Right, absolutely. Very good. But there's tons of different therapeutic techniques, that are available to people.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Amber, we've touched on just a few of them.
Yes.
But I think, whatever therapeutic approach that works has worked for you in the past, or that, you get presented with while you're in counseling, or, that you find has worked for you. I think that's that key is find something.
Yes.
Don't just say, there's nothing that can help, because there is help for people. And
Right.
I think that's the key with this, podcast, is that if you're feeling like, there's nothing that can, I'm dealing with, I'm not good enough, that there's not, I'm not deserving of these things. I think that's that key, is that people understand, if you put in the work, if you're out there and there's things that you're achieving of, accept those things. And I think that's the positive piece, is knowing that, there is assistance for people who, if you need help, we're here.
Right. And you can always make an appointment with us, and we can go through and look for, if none of these methods work, or you want to try something else, or you just don't know where to start, we can come up with different techniques to try to help you work these thoughts and kind of cope with those imposter syndrome feelings. And we, again, to reiterate it, we're covered by your student health fees. So it doesn't cost anything. Just give us a call. We're up here.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us this week, and have a great week.
Thanks, Miners.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle @S&T Wellbeing.